Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and this past Monday, the 12th of February 2024, marked 4 years since the release of An Heir to Murder, the first book in the Alice Valentine series, or the Valentine and Featherstone series. Either way, it stars Alice Valentine and Marmaduke Featherstone as they solve a crime in the small Cheshire town of Partridge Mews, and I thought that I would talk about that journey here. An Heir to Murder is a book that I kept secret for quite a while, but at the end of every one of my videos you will see a link to the video I made where I kept this book a secret, which was the making of An Heir to Murder, and I also have a few videos discussing the cover, the title, all those sorts of things, so I will leave links to them in the description. Indeed, I think Charlie and I did a Q&A for this last year when we read An Heir to Murder as part of a read-along, so I will find that and link that as well. But today I want to talk about the journey that I've gone through on the 4 years that this book has been released. I had wanted to write a cosy crime novel for over a decade. I first had the idea for a crime novel watching an episode of Last of the Summer Wine, which is from the first series, and it's called Spring Fever. In this episode, Compo is feeling a certain type of way and he goes out and he buys a new suit and he goes on a date. I can remember having this idea of 3 grown men going about the countryside and solving crimes, and I wrote the first chapter. It was terrible. It tried to write in dialect. I was 12. I didn't know enough about the world, but that got pushed aside very quickly because I realised that whilst I'd watched a lot of crime dramas on the television, I never read one. I didn't know how to formulate one. I tried again when I was 13, this time with the character of Marmaduke Featherbow. He wasn't a Featherstone at the moment, and I got through 3 chapters of that. It's funny when I look at the 3 chapters of that original novel starring Marmaduke, because the 3rd chapter is going to be the climax of one of the novels, and it feels strange that I thought that this could be like one of the first scenes in a novel when I was that age. But obviously all these characters sat around for ages in my head and I didn't really write any crime. I considered writing the crime novel after Our Doris, which is why in one of the chapters of Our Doris we meet Alice and her Auntie Magdalena. And eventually this book existed. It came out. In 2020 I held a book launch. This was the most I'd ever spent on a book before because I hired Dane of Dane Reads to be the editor of this book and got a few people in to beta read it, all this stuff. And I was really proud of this novel because it felt like a departure from what I had done before with the Our Doris series. It had been a stranger type of writing in that nobody knew that this book was going to come out. People thought that I was taking a break from writing, and I just wasn't talking about this book. I decided that I didn't want to be the type of person who talked about their writing and never actually wrote anything, which is probably who I am nowadays. I had big plans for this book. I held a launch at Button Warehouse in Macclesfield. It was well attended. I maybe got a little bit squiffy, but we don't need to talk about this. I read excerpts, I sold copies, and then the plans were to hold events throughout Cheshire East at the libraries and such like. I did get a few events in there before we went into lockdown due to a global pandemic. These things could not be helped. So immediately all the plans for this book got pushed aside and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I knew that the next book was going to be Royally Doris after that, and I spent a lot longer than I imagined I would writing Royally Doris. Even then, I never expected that it would be 4 years later and I still wouldn't have the second book out. That was never my intention. It's just the way that things went. I had this quandary because I'd been writing a series for so long, I felt like I didn't want to get stuck writing another series for an extended period of time. Another issue that I'd given myself with the cozy crime novel is that there's an arc that's going to run through 5 of the books in the series, so I felt like I didn't want people to have forgot that. When libraries started reopening, I contacted them to ask whether I could go and hold events for An Heir to Murder, and I did manage to get a few events before Royally Doris was released, and I even got invited back for a crime panel in November 2022, which was exceptionally well attended. It's one of the best events that I've ever gone to. I was on a panel with Ruby Speechley, Mandy Byett and DK Bowman, all local crime writers, and it was just a great event. That was the last thing I had to do for an Heir to Murder, and it was also my last actual event. November 2022 was the last event I had for any of my books, but this one was for an Heir to Murder. Yet I still thought I was going to take a break. I was going to write the charity shop novel, and I did write a first part of that book, but then I felt too conflicted. I felt like the next book that I wanted to bring out was going to be the second cozy crime novel, and I kept having all these ideas for the crime novel. I had this great idea that I would announce the title during the live show with Charlie last year when we were talking about an Heir to Murder, because I had been writing exceptionally quickly, getting a lot down on paper, and I thought, well, if I keep up this pace, then I can probably have the book finished by June and speak to Dane and have it out at the end of last year. That isn't what happened. One of the reasons that Shepherd's Delight came out last year is due to the fact that the second crime novel didn't come out. I did also want to release a poetry collection, I'm not saying that, but I had planned for this book to hopefully come out by September, and in September it hadn't happened. Admittedly, we had a pretty fraught time in my family last year. We had a few tragedies that I haven't spoken about on here, probably will never speak about on here, but the people who need to know everything that occurred. It's one of the reasons we had fewer videos, and there were times in which I didn't write because I just couldn't. I ended up taking a bit more time than I thought with the second Alice Valentine. I released this title a year ago for this book, which was Mistakes Make Murder. Since then, I've wondered about changing the title to Mistakes Mean Murder. I could change the title again. Originally, I was going to call the book Murder by Mistake, but there's already a book called that. So at the moment, the title is once again tentative. I have been working on the end of this book for a while now. I say that. Last week I wrote the scene in which the murderer is confronted, and then I've written another scene after that. I talked about this in my blog, so there isn't actually much work on that side of things, but I do have another side story that takes place throughout the novel that I need to write to, and there are some scenes that I would like to add back in, which means that I don't actually know when this book is going to be finished. And I had hoped that this was going to be a fantastic writing update, that I was going to come in today celebrating 4 years of an Heir to Murder, saying to you, the second book is finished, at least the draft is. We have to remember that a first draft for Charlie is never like a proper first draft. It's never hugely scrappy, because I redraft as I go along, I edit as I go along, things change, pieces get moved about. But we aren't finished with the second book yet. Part of me doesn't feel too disappointed by that, because I feel like I really need to do a huge relaunch of this series because of the fact that I lost all my events the first time around, and I didn't really get that many events in 2022. So I feel like there is a space there that I could revisit places and discuss the first book as I head into releasing the second. And I feel as though once I have the second book written, hopefully that will have helped me gather the momentum to continue writing books 3, 4 and 5 and have this first set of stories for Alice and Marmaduke complete. And after that, I don't think that there is going to be an arc in the stories that is going to go over multiple books. I think that I'm going to try and just keep each mystery self-contained, obviously have reoccurring characters and that sort of thing, but just avoid this task, because as much as I've enjoyed how difficult it is, I've also thought it's asking a lot of the reader. Otherwise, how do I feel about an Heir to Murder being 4 years old? Honestly, I can't believe that it's been 4 years since that book came out. I actually finished the first draft of this in August 2018, so what's that? That will have been 6 years since the first draft was finished later this year, And I feel like I have changed as a writer, which has meant that this style has changed a bit within this novel, and I'm trying to recapture some of the humour that I don't think I have lost. I just think it hasn't been present because I focused so heavily on plot this time, whereas previously I was more focused on the telling of the tale. I've enjoyed writing both books, but this has been a bit more difficult in terms of making sure all of the pieces are in the correct places. My hope at the moment is that the book will be finished at some point this year and maybe be released at some point this year, but I'm also not making any promises about that anymore. I'm working on the sequel to An Heir to Murder, the second book featuring Alice Valentine and Marmaduke Featherstone. If you have yet to read An Heir to Murder and would like to do so, the first in a cosy crime series, we have a rather bolshy young woman who has just been fired from her job for accidentally killing an octogenarian, and an older man, and it's cosy, it's comedic, and I think it's one of the best things I ever did write. Does it add anything new to the mystery genre? No. Is it any different than a standard cosy crime? No. But you'll have great fun whilst you're reading it. So please, if you are considering it, do pick up a copy of An Heir to Murder, because I promise the sequel is coming at some point. There are also some great reviews on YouTube, so you don't just have to trust me on that. Go to Goodreads too, some nice reviews on there. In fact, as we've said about this book, one of my favourite reviews came from a lady named Susan. If you're still out there, Susan, I thank you for this review, which was nothing outstanding, really. I honestly, either I'm going to get that on a t-shirt or it's going to be the title of my memoir. Anyway, that's me. That is 4 years of An Heir to Murder. What I should say is a thank you. I should thank all of the people that have read and reviewed this book over the last 4 years. I would also like to, say thank you to the people that have championed it. Thank you to Charlie Brooke, who actually helped host a read along of this and get it read by more people last year. Thank you to Dane for editing the thing, and thank you to the few people that I can remember off the top of my head, and I apologise if I forget you, but I know that Sophie of Redhead Reading and Brian of Bookish gave favourable reviews to this book back in the day, and I also know that Steve Donahue said some nice things about it, that I wasn't trying anything new in the genre, but I wasn't trying to, and that it was a good book within the cosy crime world. And if I fail to mention you, just know that I am grateful to anyone who shared and discussed my book within the last 4 years, and hopefully the next one will be with you at some point in the future. I'm going to be wary of that because my readers have started dying off. Anyway, that's me. That's An Heir to Murder. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.